They say the circus is a place of wonders. They lie. Welcome to Cirque Nocturne, a traveling show pitched on the edge of a ghost town, where the performers aren't just unusual, they're hungry. My name is Jonas Reid, a man running from fire, and I came here seeking obscurity, seeking oblivion. Instead, I found myself in a place that demanded 3 strange rules just to stay alive. What's the creepiest circus or carnival you've ever seen? Tell me in the comments below. And if you're brave enough to join the crew for the season, subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules and ring that bell. Because under this big top, the show must always go on, and the audience is always watching. The performance begins now. The offer for Cirque Nocturne arrived with the first killing frost of an Alaskan autumn I wasn't supposed to survive, promising obscurity and honest labor. It delivered a horror show penned in blood and permafrost. I'd been adrift for 6 months, a ghost haunting the grimy underbelly of Anchorage, ever since the Milligan warehouse fire had claimed my partner, Danny, and seared my own name onto the department's list of liabilities. The official report cited faulty wiring, an unavoidable tragedy, but Danny's last choked scream, the image of his silhouette consumed by an inferno I should have been able to navigate, the suffocating smell of burning chemicals and his melting gear. Those were the unofficial reports that played on a continuous, tormenting loop in my head. I was a firefighter who couldn't stand the sight of flames anymore, a man running from the smoke of his own failures. So when the vaguely worded advertisement for Winter Crew, remote touring show, all skills considered, appeared on a grimy job board in a half-empty diner, I latched onto it like a drowning man to a piece of driftwood. The pay was negligible, the details scant, but the location, vicinity of Coldwater, interior Alaska, promised the kind of profound, isolating emptiness I craved. Coldwater, a name like a forgotten headstone, a place deliberately erased from modern maps after a series of unexplained disappearances and rumored madness had emptied it decades ago. Perfect. The journey was a descent into an ever bleaker wilderness, a series of rattling bush plains, and then a final bone-jarring ride in the back of an ancient canvas-covered truck, driven by a man whose face I never clearly saw. His words sparse grunts over the engine's roar. We arrived at the circus encampment as a bruised twilight led across the vast, snow-dusted tundra. It was less a camp, more a collection of dark, ancient-looking wooden wagons, their paint faded and peeling, and a massive patched canvas big top, its peaks like a row of jagged teeth against the bruised sky. They were all hunched together for warmth, or perhaps for protection, on the very edge of the silent skeletal remains of Coldwater, its ruined cabins like hollow eye sockets staring out at us. The air was biting, sharp with the scent of pine, frozen earth, wood smoke, and something else, a faint, coppery, unsettlingly sweet tang that I couldn't quite place. A woman emerged from the largest, most ornate wagon, the one that proclaimed Le Bureau du Directeur in faded gold lettering. Vivienne Cross. She was an anomaly in this desolate landscape. Her beauty striking, almost preternatural, her tailored, dark velvet coat out of place against the rough-hewn backdrop. Her smile was warm, her voice a soothing, melodic balm that seemed to smooth the ragged edges of the biting wind. Mr. Reid, I presume? Welcome to Cirque Nocturne. We're so pleased you could join us for the season. She handed me a thick, sealed manila envelope and a small, intricately carved wooden charm, shaped like a stylized closed eye, strung on a worn leather thong. Your employment package, Mr. Reid, she said, her smile unwavering. The charm is mandatory for staff cohesion and general well-being. Later, in the cramped, frigid bunk of the wagon assigned to me, I opened the envelope. The contract was brief, its terms vague, the pay even more meager than I'd anticipated. Beneath it, on a separate sheet of thick, slightly yellowed paper, typed with an old-fashioned serif font, were 3 directives. Their stark, almost biblical pronouncements were a jarring contrast to Vivian Cross's professional, almost saccharine demeanor. Never enter any cage or enclosure alone. Even if you hear someone calling for help, what mimics human voices hasn't been human for centuries. It learns. Always wear the charm necklace provided, especially during the midnight show. The performers can smell the difference between staff and food. The charm masks your fear, mostly. If you ever see the contortionist fold herself into something geometrically impossible, do not gasp or show any reaction. Acknowledging the impossibility makes you visible to what helps her bend that way. It craves witness. I read them again, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. This wasn't just a job. This was something else entirely. As I reluctantly slipped the wooden charm over my head, I felt a faint, almost imperceptible vibration from it, like a trapped insect. For a fleeting second, that coppery sweet smell in the air intensified, and I thought I heard a distant rhythmic thudding, like a giant, muffled heartbeat from deep beneath the frozen Alaskan ground. The work at Cirque Nocturne began before the first pale light of the Alaskan dawn. It was grueling, mind-numbing, and achingly cold, hauling frozen, unidentifiable crates from the supply wagons, mending tears in the vast, stiff canvas of the big top with thick waxed thread that bit into my numb fingers, and most unsettlingly, mucking out a series of empty, heavily barred animal enclosures behind the main tent. They were clearly old, the wood dark and splintered, the iron rusted. There were no animals, not that I ever saw, but the enclosures reeked of an unfamiliar, pungent musk of old fear, and that persistent, faint coppery tang, stronger here. The other circus hands, a collection of silent, watchful figures with faces like wind-scoured granite, moved like ghosts, their eyes rarely meeting mine, their words, when they spoke at all, monosyllabic grunts. It was during my second day, while wrestling with a frozen tarpaulin, that I met Harper Vale. She was another recent hire, she said, ostensibly a general assistant, though she moved with a quiet competence that suggested more than just a passing acquaintance with the rigors of a traveling show. She was small, wiry, with observant dark eyes that seemed to miss nothing, and an air of weary resilience that I recognized perhaps in myself. We didn't talk much, but an unspoken alliance formed, a shared understanding of our outsider status in this strange, insular world. She, too, wore the carved wooden charm, never taking it off. The first rule was tested on the 3rd night. I was tasked with securing the latches on that row of empty, shadowed cages, the wind howling a mournful dirge through their bars. From the deepest, darkest enclosure, the one that always seemed to exude a particularly potent chill, I heard it, a faint, desperate whimpering, like a lost child. Then a voice, choked with tears, heartbreakingly young. "Jonas, is that you, Jonas? Help me, please. I'm stuck in here." It sounded like a girl, terrified, alone. My heart, already bruised by past failures, clenched. I took a step towards the cage, peering into its oppressive, Stygian darkness. "Don't." Harper's voice, low and urgent, came from behind me. Her hand, surprisingly strong, gripped my arm. Her face, in the flickering light of my lantern, was pale, her eyes wide with a genuine fear that mirrored my own dawning horror. "It's not real, Jonas. It learns voices. From the wind, from old newspapers, from memories it plucks from the air. It's not real." As she spoke, the whimpering from the cage intensified, then, chillingly, it morphed, deepening into a low, guttural, almost predatory chuckle that was utterly terrifyingly inhuman. I stumbled back, the sound raising the hairs on my neck. That night, Vivian Cross, her smile as serene and unsettling as ever, instructed me to remain in my staff wagon during the midnight show. The charm, she reminded me, her voice a silken murmur, must be securely fastened. It's a private performance, Mr. Reid. The rhythmic thudding I'd heard on my first night was more pronounced now, a deep, resonant pulse that seemed to vibrate up from the permafrost itself. Wrapped in every layer I owned, I crept towards the big top, the canvas groaning under the assault of the wind. I found a small, well-hidden tier near the back, a spy hole into the spectacle within. What I saw was a grotesque parody of a circus. The ring was lit by flickering, strangely colored gas lamps that cast long, dancing shadows. The music, if you could call it that, was a discordant wail from an unseen calliope, punctuated by those deep, unsettling drums, their rhythm like a monstrous off-kilter heartbeat. And the performers, they were wrong. Horribly, fascinatingly wrong. Shapes that defied anatomy, moving with an unnatural fluid grace, or a horrifying, broken doll jerkiness. There were things that shambled, things that slithered, things that seemed to be made more of shadow and suggestion than solid flesh. I saw no audience in the tiered wooden stands, only row upon row of empty shadowed seats. Yet a palpable wave of cold, expectant presence emanated from those darkened stands, a collective unseen gaze that made my skin crawl. The wooden charm necklace suddenly felt intensely warm against my chest, almost burning. It was then I glimpsed him at the center of it all. The Ringmaster, Malcolm Dyer, as I'd learned his name was from a faded poster. He was a tall, gaunt figure in a threadbare, deep crimson velvet coat and a battered top hat that always seemed to cast his eyes in impenetrable shadow. His voice, amplified by some unseen means, boomed through the big top with an unnatural hypnotic resonance, each word perfectly enunciated, like an actor in a grand, macabre play. And now, mesdames et messieurs, et autres intelligences, he declared, his unseen gaze sweeping the empty stands. For your delectation and terror, we present the incomparable Lysandra, weaver of forms. The image of the midnight show, its grotesque performers and the unseen, watching intelligences, burrowed deep into my already troubled sleep. The coppery sweet tang that permeated the circus grounds, which I now recognized with a sickening certainty as the scent of old blood mixed with something else, something metallic and alien, seemed to cling to the inside of my nostrils, a constant reminder of what I had witnessed. I started paying more attention to Cliff Remington, the gaunt, perpetually exhausted-looking sound engineer. He was a fixture in a small, cluttered wagon, overflowing with archaic-looking audio equipment, reel-to-reel tape machines, oscillators with glowing vacuum tubes, and a massive, custom-built soundboard covered in a bewildering array of dials. He always wore a pair of oversized, heavily padded headphones, even when not actively working, and was constantly scribbling in a dog-eared notebook filled with strange symbols, complex waveform drawings, and what looked like attempts to transcribe an unearthly language. He'd mutter to himself about subharmonics, residual psychic resonances, and frequencies only they can truly appreciate. He smelled of ozone, hot solder, and old, dusty paper. He seemed less a technician, more a seismographer of the damned. The second rule, the one about the charm necklace, was nearly violated a few nights later. I'd been working late, repairing a section of collapsed fencing around the perimeter, my mind preoccupied with the gnawing anxieties of this place. I'd returned to my wagon, shed my outer layers, and was about to collapse onto my narrow bunk when a runner summoned me. The Ringmaster required some urgent adjustment to a rigging line in the big top. In my haste and exhaustion, I forgot. The charm necklace lay on my small rickety table. As I approached the big top, its canvas walls seeming to breathe in the icy wind, I felt it. A sudden intense wave of awareness. Not from any human source. One of the performers, a towering, shadowy figure, with far too many joints and limbs that bent at impossible angles, was being led from a side tent towards the main entrance by two silent, cloaked handlers. As I drew nearer, its unseen face, a mere suggestion of coalesced shadow, swiveled directly towards me from across the snow-swept, lantern-lit lot. A low, guttural growl, like stones grinding together deep underground, rumbled from its direction. I felt a wave of pure, predatory hunger, a cold, focused intent wash over me. My blood turned to ice. Then I remembered the charm. Frantically, I fumbled in my pockets, then realized my error. I spun, ready to bolt back to my wagon, but the shadowy figure was already moving, detaching itself from its handlers, its unnatural limbs unfolding with horrifying speed. Just as I thought it would lunge, a sharp cry from one of the handlers, and a snapped command I didn't understand seemed to give it pause. I didn't wait. I fled, my heart hammering, back to my wagon, snatched the charm, and jammed it over my head. When I dared to look back, the figure was being forcibly restrained, but its shadowed face was still fixed on where I had stood. The air still crackled with its thwarted, terrifying interest. The charm felt like a lead weight around my neck. My encounters with Lysandra, the contortionist, became more frequent. I'd see her practicing in a dimly lit side tent, usually alone, her slender form moving with a mesmerizing, almost serpentine fluidity. She was beautiful, in a stark, otherworldly way, her features sharp, her eyes large and dark, and holding a profound, unsettling stillness. Her initial movements were those of a highly skilled acrobat, pushing the boundaries of human flexibility. But then, as if some invisible switch were flipped, she would begin to change. Her limbs would bend at angles that defied bone and sinew, her spine curving like a willow branch in a gale, her joints seeming to dislocate and relocate with an oily, silent precision. I'd watch, a horrified fascination warring with a primal urge to look away. One evening, concealed by the shadows of a stack of crates, I witnessed the full extent of her art. Lysandra suddenly twisted, her torso rotating a full 360 degrees, while her legs remained rooted to the ground. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, her head lolled backwards, impossibly far, until it touched her own spine, her body forming a perfect, horrifying circle of flesh and bone, an Ouroboros of human form, a shape that had no right to exist, a living violation of geometry. An involuntary gasp escaped my lips, a tiny sound of shock and profound disbelief. Lysandra's head, still in that impossible position, snapped up, her eyes, unnaturally wide and luminous in the dim, flickering lamplight, fixed directly on me. And for a terrifying, stomach-churning instant, I saw something behind her eyes, something that wasn't Lysandra at all. A flicker of ancient, complex, geometric intelligence, cold and vast and utterly alien. The wooden charm necklace seared against my skin. A sudden, intense burn. I recoiled, forcing myself to look away, my heart pounding, the image of that impossible fold, and the ancient eyes within, seared into my brain. Later that night, Harper found me outside my wagon, staring blankly at the swirling snow. Her face was pale, her usual composure shaken. "You saw Lysandra's full performance, didn't you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, her breath misting in the frigid air. "The impossible fold." I nodded, unable to speak. "The thing that helps her bend that way," Harper continued, her eyes dark with a fear I now shared. "It saw you too, Jonas. It saw your reaction. It remembers faces that acknowledge its work." The feeling of being watched became a constant, unwelcome companion. It wasn't just the silent, assessing gazes of the other circus folk, or the chilling awareness of Lyssandra's helper. It was something else, something older, woven into the very fabric of this frozen, forgotten place. Coldwater itself, with its skeletal, snow-filled cabins and wind-scoured graveyard, seemed to emanate a profound, sorrowful malevolence. I found a crate of rotting archives in one of the less dilapidated wagons. Old, faded newspaper clippings from the late 19th century, detailing Coldwater's brief, prosperous gold rush past, then its sudden, inexplicable decline. The later articles were filled with hushed whispers of mass hysteria, strange lights seen dancing over the tundra, entire families vanishing from locked cabins, people simply walking out into the endless snowy wastes and never returning. The final, brittle clipping, dated 1898, simply stated, Coldwater officially declared unpopulated. Reasons unknown. Area best avoided. Vivienne Cross, her beauteous stark, almost offensive contrast to the surrounding decay, began to seek me out more frequently. Her demeanor was always solicitous, her voice a silken caress. She'd appear at my wagon with a flask of surprisingly good hot coffee, or find me during a solitary work detail. Her questions about my past, my firefighter experiences, my lingering grief over Danny, becoming more probing, more intimate. She spoke of loneliness, of finding a true family within the unique embrace of Cirque Nocturne. Her perfume, an exotic, cloying blend of night-blooming flowers, and something vaguely metallic, seemed to linger in the frigid air long after she departed, making my head feel fuzzy, my will strangely pliant. I felt a disturbing compulsion to confide in her, to unburden myself. Yet a deeper, colder instinct screamed at me to resist, to keep my ghosts locked away. Cliff Remington, the sound engineer, was visibly deteriorating. His gaunt frame seemed even more skeletal, his eyes sunk deep in shadowed sockets, burning with a feverish, obsessive light. He claimed the frequencies were getting stronger, clearer. I can almost understand their language now, Jonas, he'd rasped, his voice hoarse from disuse or from whispering to unseen things. The audience below, they're anticipating. They're calling for something. He started making increasingly erratic modifications to the circus main sound system, a monstrous assemblage of brass horns, resonating chambers, and what looked like repurposed telegraph equipment, muttering about amplifying the true signal, about opening the channel fully. Harper Vale, in contrast, grew more withdrawn, but also more intense. Her quiet observations now tinged with a grim urgency. She began sharing cryptic warnings with me, always in hushed tones, when we were sure no one else was near. She spoke of the circus' true purpose, not as entertainment, but as a harvest. She hinted at cycles, at offerings that went beyond midnight shows. She finally revealed a closely guarded secret. She had grown up in a remote village not far from where Coldwater once stood. Her family, she said, her voice barely a whisper, her eyes dark with ancestral memory. They knew the old stories, the ones the miners ignored. They tried to warn people about this place, about what sleeps beneath the ice. One particularly brutal night, when the temperature had plunged and the wind howled like a banshee, Harper led me to her small, meticulously neat wagon. From a hidden compartment beneath her bunk, she retrieved a worn leather satchel. Inside were old, hand-stitched journals filled with an archaic script, a collection of strange, hand-carved bone and antler totems, and most disturbingly, a set of razor-sharp obsidian-bladed knives, their edges gleaming dully in the lantern light. This circus, Jonas, she said, her voice tight with a controlled fury that surprised me. It's a blight, a recurring sickness. It feeds on places like Coldwater, on the memories, on the despair, and then it moves on, leaving desolation. My family, They were keepers of a different kind of compact, a promise made long ago to unmake it, to silence the drums for good. A horrifying, vivid nightmare jolted me awake later that night. The coppery scent of blood, thick and cloying in my own wagon. It wasn't fire this time. I was trapped, helpless, inside one of those dark, empty cages from the impenetrable blackness beyond the bars. I heard Danny's voice, desperate, pleading for help. Then, his voice morphed, deepening into the Ringmaster's booming, theatrical laugh, which in turn dissolved into a chilling, inhuman, chittering sound, like 1,000 insects scuttling over dry bones. I woke up clawing at my throat. The wooden charm necklace clutched so tightly in my hand its edges dug into my palm. The thudding from beneath the earth seemed louder tonight, more insistent, and the air in my wagon was undeniably, sickeningly sweet with the smell of fresh blood. The announcement, when it came, was delivered by the Ringmaster himself, his voice, amplified by some unseen sorcery, booming across the desolate, snow-swept encampment. Prepare yourselves for the culmination of our winter revels, the grand Solstice Gala, a night of unparalleled wonders, of exquisite terrors, where the veil between worlds grows thin, and the true artistry of Cirque Nocturne shall be fully revealed. A palpable shift occurred within the circus. The already charged atmosphere thickened, thrumming with a nervous, almost ecstatic energy. The unseen audience below, I could feel it, was stirring, its collective, ancient consciousness thrumming with a terrible, joyous anticipation. The rhythmic thudding from beneath the permafrost became a constant, visceral pulse, a heartbeat counting down to some unspeakable consummation. Vivian and Cross, her beauty now taking on a feverish, almost predatory sheen, made her final, insidious move on me. She sought me out in the dim, flickering light of the mess tent, her voice a silken web of promises. "Jonas," she murmured, her hand resting on my arm, her touch sending an unnatural, cloying warmth through my layers of clothing. "You've become one of us, haven't you? You understand the unique beauty of this place, the family we offer." She spoke of belonging, of an end to my pain, my guilt, my loneliness. "The Ringmaster," she purred, her eyes holding mine with hypnotic intensity. "He has a special role for you in the gala, Jonas. A starring role, a final absolution, but it requires complete trust. He asks that you remove your charm necklace during the performance, as a sign of your commitment, your true initiation." Her perfume, that exotic heady blend, seemed to fill my lungs, dulling my senses, making her words sound like the sweetest, most reasonable anachronisms. But Harper's desperate urgency had become a counter-melody to Vivian's siren song. And she cornered me near the silent skeletal remains of Coldwater, the wind whipping her dark hair across her pale, determined face. "The Solstice Gala, Jonas," she hissed, her eyes burning with a fanatic light. "It's when it is most focused, when the audience below is most open, most vulnerable. My family's journals speak of it. It's the night for the unbinding." She revealed her full, terrifying plan. To use the heightened energy of the gala, the direct conduit to the entity beneath, to perform a counter-ritual, a blood unbinding designed to sever the ancient ties, to silence the drums, to destroy Cirque Nocturne and the parasitic intelligence it served. But the ritual, she continued, her gaze unwavering, it requires a willing conduit, someone connected to the circus's recent energy, someone who still carries the scent of the outside world, its disbelief, its sorrow, someone to channel the disruptive force, to be the fulcrum. Her eyes fixed on mine. "It has to be you, Jonas. The journals are clear. You have to break a rule. The first rule. During the gala, when the call is strongest, you have to willingly step into the cage of echoes. Alone." My blood ran cold. The cage of echoes, the one from which the mimicry was strongest. the one that reeked most intensely of fear, and that coppery, alien scent. Cliff Remington, meanwhile, had descended into a state of near catatonia, broken by fits of frantic activity at his monstrous soundboard. He was a wraith, his eyes like burnt holes in a parchment face, muttering about perfect resonance. The final frequency, the true voice of the understage. He jury-rigged additional speakers, massive brass horns, salvaged from God knows where, aiming them not at the empty stands, but downwards, towards the frozen earth beneath the big top. The night of the gala arrived with an unearthly stillness. The wind died. The snow stopped. An oppressive silence blanketed the tundra, broken only by the deep rhythmic thudding from below. As the grotesque overture began, a cacophony of discordant brass and those hellish drums, Cliff Remington, his face a mask of ecstatic terror, threw a master switch. Instead of music, a deafening, mind-shattering wave of subharmonic sound erupted from his modified system. A sound that wasn't heard so much as felt. A physical pressure that vibrated bones, rattled teeth, and clawed at the sanity. It was a direct, amplified call from, or to, the audience below. The frozen ground beneath the big top trembled violently. The performers on stage went into a berserk, shrieking frenzy. In the ensuing chaos, Vivian Cross, her beautiful face contorted into a mask of predatory triumph, grabbed my arm, her grip like steel. "Now, Jonas," she screamed over the sonic assault. "Your time has come. The Ringmaster awaits. You were chosen." A perfect vessel of grief and fear for the grand finale. She dragged me towards the main stage, where the Ringmaster stood, his arms outstretched, his shadowed face tilted towards the shrieking chaos. His eyes, for the first time, were clearly visible, and they were not human. They glowed with a faint, internal crimson light. His form seemed to flicker, to shimmer, and for a horrifying instant, I saw glimpses of something else clinging to him. Something ancient and chitinous and parasitic, its tendrils woven through his flesh, his voice no longer his own, but a horrifying chorus of whispers, 1,000 dying breaths. He was no longer Malcolm Dyer. He was a living gateway. Harper was there too, near the Cage of Echoes, her obsidian knives glinting in the hellish light, her face a mask of desperate ritualistic concentration, chanting words in a language that clawed at my ears. She gestated towards the cage, her eyes locking with mine, pleading, demanding. I was trapped, Vivian's iron grip pulling me towards the monstrous Ringmaster, Harper's desperate ritual demanding I step into the cage, the grotesque performers closing in, their forms warping and shifting in the sonic onslaught, and the terrifying, tangible presence of the audience below, surging up from the violated earth. Fire, ice, and a symphony of damnation. My past, my present, my potential, horrifying future, all converging in this single blood-soaked, screaming moment. The big top was a vortex of sonic and psychic carnage. Cliff Remington's amplified call had ripped a wound in the fabric of reality, and through it, the raw, unfiltered malevolence of the audience below was pouring. A palpable tide of ancient hunger and icy dread. The grotesque performers were no longer performing. They were writhing, shrieking, some dissolving into puddles of Icarus slime, others mutating into even more horrifying configurations, their forms dictated by the abyssal frequencies. Vivienne Cross, her beautiful features now contorted into a rictus of insane ecstasy, dragged me inexorably towards the Ringmaster. "Embrace it, Jonas," she screamed, her voice a shrill counterpoint to the subharmonic roar. "Become part of the eternal performance. Your pain will be our masterpiece." But Harper's ritual, her desperate blood, unbinding, was also reaching its crescendo. She stood before the Cage of Echoes, her obsidian knives flashing, carving frantic, archaic symbols into her own forearms. Her blood, dark in the flickering, hellish light, spattering the frozen ground. Her chant intensified, a raw guttural invocation that seemed to push back, however feebly, against the overwhelming tide of the audience below. The Ringmaster, or the parasitic entity wearing his skin, turned its glowing crimson gaze upon me. A wave of utter desolation, of soul-crushing despair, washed over me. Danny's dying screams, the weight of the collapsed roof, the smell of my own burning flesh, all amplified, all twisted into an unbearable symphony of my deepest failures. Your guilt is exquisite, Jonas Reid. The chorus of whispers that was its voice echoed directly in my mind. A perfect offering, a vibrant new thread in our tapestry. It was then, in that vortex of terror and despair, that something snapped. Not my sanity, but a different kind of tether. The years of buried grief, of self-loathing, of running, they coalesced into a single, white-hot point of defiance. This wasn't absolution. This was annihilation. No, the word was torn from my throat. A raw, desperate roar that was mine alone. I wrenched my arm from Vivian's grasp with a strength I didn't know I possessed. She stumbled, her perfect mask cracking with surprise, then rage. But before she could recover, one of the larger, more amorphous performers, its form a shifting mass of tentacles and weeping eyes, convulsed under the sonic assault and crashed into her, dragging her down into a writhing, shrieking heap. Her final scream was abruptly cut short, a sound swallowed by the abyss. I didn't hesitate. I ran, not towards the Ringmaster, but towards Harper, towards the cage of echoes. She saw me coming, her blood-streaked face a mask of desperate hope. Now, Jonas. The first rule, break it willingly. Become the anchor for the unbinding. The cage of echoes pulsed with an inner darkness, the coppery scent of blood and alien musk overwhelmingly strong. From within its Stygian depths, I heard it. Danny's voice, clear and terrified. Jonas, help me. I'm in here. Don't leave me again. My firefighter's instinct, my deepest, most ingrained programming, screamed at me to go in, to save it. But this time I knew. It wasn't Danny. It was the echo. It was the hunger. But Harper's ritual. It needed the rule broken. It needed that connection. With a guttural cry, I ripped the wooden charm necklace from my throat. The sudden absence of its familiar weight, its subtle thrum, was like a physical blow. The air crackled. The predatory attention of everything in that tent, seen and unseen, snapped towards me with palpable force. I was exposed, raw, food. I didn't enter the cage. Instead, I hurled the charm, my only protection, into the cage of echoes. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The moment the charm crossed the threshold of the cage, it exploded in a flash of searing white light and a concussive blast of pure, unadulterated silence. A void where the subharmonic roar had been. The mimicry within the cage shrieked, a sound that tore at the very fabric of the air, then was abruptly cut off. Harper's ritual, denied its intended conduit but supercharged by the charm's sacrifice, went wild. The obsidian knives in our hands glowed with an internal silver fire. The symbols she'd carved into her arms blazed. A shockwave of power erupted from her, not of sound, but of pure, untamed, elemental energy. The Ringmaster, its parasitic form flickering violently, let out an ear-splitting, multi-toned screech of agony and rage. The audience below recoiled, a psychic wave of immense, frustrated hunger. The big top groaned, its canvas walls ripping, its massive support poles splintering. The ground bucked. Then chaos. Dawn broke over a scene of unimaginable devastation. The great canvas of the Cirque Nocturne, Big Top, lay in tatters, a collapsed, smoldering ruin against the blood-streaked snow. The ornate wagons were splintered, overturned, some still burning with an unnatural cold green fire. The air reeked of ozone, burnt flesh, both human and otherwise, and that lingering coppery sweet tang of the abyss. The rhythmic thudding from beneath the permafrost had ceased. For now, I was alive. Somehow. Bruised, battered, my ears ringing, but alive. My sacrifice of the charm, that desperate, improvised act of defiance, had somehow disrupted the unholy symphony, turned Harper's unbinding ritual into a chaotic, uncontrolled explosion of energies that had, it seemed, driven back the audience below, or at least severed its most immediate connection. Harper was gone, vanished. Whether consumed by her own ritual, or taken by the retreating entity, or simply escaped into the vast, indifferent Alaskan wilderness, I didn't know. All that remained where she had stood was a scorched patch of earth, and one of her obsidian knives, its blade still faintly warm to the touch. Vivian Cross was a grotesque, mangled heap amidst the wreckage, her perfect beauty shattered, her form partially merged with the remains of the amorphous performer that had dragged her down. A fitting, if horrifying, end for the gatekeeper of souls. The Ringmaster, Malcolm Dyer, was also gone. Or rather, the human husk was there, slumped near the ruined main stage, his crimson coat torn, his top hat lying in the blood-stained snow. But the parasitic entity, the conduit for the audience below, had retreated, leaving behind only an empty, shrunken shell, its eyes vacant, its face frozen in a silent, eternal scream. Coldwater, the ghost town, watched silently from the edge of the carnage, its skeletal cabins indifferent to the horrors that had unfolded. I was alone, the sole human survivor of Cirque Nocturne's final, disastrous performance. The days that followed were a blur of exhaustion, pain, and a gnawing, hollow emptiness. I salvaged what I could, a few rations, a tattered blanket, the Ringmaster's surprisingly intact top hat. For reasons I couldn't quite articulate, the silence of the Alaskan wilderness, once a desired escape, was now a heavy, listening presence, pregnant with the memory of inhuman sounds and unspeakable horrors. Eventually, I started walking south, away from the charnel ground of the circus, away from the silent accusation of Coldwater. It took weeks of trudging through snow, of near starvation, of warding off predators, both animal and, I sometimes feared, otherwise. The memory of the fire that killed Danny, the guilt that had driven me here, was still present, but it was different, overshadowed perhaps by a newer, colder, more profound terror. I made it back to something resembling civilization, a remote logging outpost, then a small town, then finally, Anchorage. I never spoke of Cirque Nocturne, of Coldwater, of the rules. Who would believe me? They'd lock me away. I tried to build a life, found work on a fishing boat, the vastness of the ocean a different kind of isolation, but one that felt cleaner, somehow. The nightmares persisted, of course. Impossible geometries, inhuman voices, the scent of blood, and ozone. But they were fainter now, the edges blurred by time and distance. Years later, I was in a bar in a fog-bound Oregon coastal town, a lifetime away from Alaska. An old, grizzled fisherman was spinning a yarn to a handful of bored tourists. Something about a legendary traveling circus that appeared in remote, forgotten places. A circus that performed only at midnight. A circus with performers who weren't quite right. He called it Le Cirque des Ombres, the Circus of Shadows. My blood ran cold. He mentioned a recent sighting, he said, from a trapper friend, deep in the unmapped wilderness of the Yukon. They were setting up, he claimed, near an old abandoned mining town. A town with a name that echoed in the deepest, most fearful chambers of my memory. A town called Frostbite Creek. Later that night, I found a small, anonymously mailed package waiting for me at my cheap motel. No return address. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded black velvet, was a single, exquisitely carved wooden charm, shaped like a stylized, closed eye, identical to the one I had hurled into the cage of echoes, and beneath it, a small, elegantly printed ticket stub. Cirque Nocturne, Grand Reopening Gala. Frostbite Creek, Yukon Territory, midnight performance. Your presence is expected. The faint, rhythmic thudding, like a giant heartbeat from beneath the earth, seemed to echo in the silence of my room, carried on the mournful Oregon wind. The show, it seemed, must always go on. And perhaps they were still looking for a ringmaster. Me, Cirque Nocturne is a blight, a moving stain on the world. Jonas Reid learned that some performances come with a terrifying price. The rules were meant to hide the horror, but the audience below is always hungry. The show may be over for now. Seriously, if you didn't stay until the very end, you missed the ultimate revelation, the twist that reveals the true, terrifying scope of Cirque Nocturne's reach. The last few moments change everything. What do you think the audience below is? What was the Ringmaster's true nature? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you made it through the night at Cirque Nocturne, if the performers haven't claimed you, then you're already a part of our troupe. Subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules, because some tickets are non-transferable, and the show is always coming to a town near you.